All right, we are back. What is going on? Colts Nation, welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Your guys, Cody and Derek, back for another one, guys. And Indianapolis Colts training camp is almost here, only a few days away. Thank goodness. So, with that, wanted to kind of round it out and talk about the last big position battle that we are going to be watching here for the Indianapolis Colts heading into training camp, going into the preseason, all that good stuff. But before we do that, just want to remind you guys, this episode is presented by Prize Picks. Be sure to hop over to prizepicks.com today or use their mobile app. When you sign up, use the code BTJ for $100 deposit match. All right, Derek, let's talk about this defensive end / edge group for the Indianapolis Colts. And I'm going to be honest, Derek, I think this is the deepest we've probably ever seen this position group in particular when it comes to the Chris Ballard era. I mean, you have multiple guys. I think you're going to be able to play in waves, unlike you've pretty much ever done before, and still have a lot of effective guys here when it comes to the defensive end position. But, Derek, I want to specifically talk about with this defensive end position, really, I think that other defensive end position alongside Samson Ebukam, right? The Indianapolis Colts obviously have Kwity Paye still, who they picked up his fifth-year option, former first-round pick in 2021, and, a guy that had a career high in sacks, but when he dove a little bit deeper, wasn't the greatest guy at getting after the quarterback on a consistent basis. Now, very, very good run defender, I will say that. And then obviously you have the Indianapolis Colts first-round pick out of UCLA, edge Latu, who is more of that pass rush specialist. I mean, what he did at UCLA the last couple seasons is very impressive. So when you kind of look at those two guys, I think those are going to be the two guys who I'm keeping an eye on kind of for that position. And I think regardless of who does win this, kind of similar to, the wide receiver position with Alec Pierce and Adonai Mitchell, Derek, I think both guys are going to see the field a pretty decent amount this season, or are going to be kind of pivotal to what the Colts do on defense.
Yeah.
But when it comes strictly, I think, to who wins it, I'm curious, number one, who starts out as that quote-unquote starter right away. And then number two, as the season progresses along, what do those snap counts kind of look like? I'm curious, obviously, at the start of the season, but then as the season progresses on, what is this going to look like? Say from week 1 to week 15, like what's it going to look like? Is Latu going to continue to get more snaps, or is it going to be pretty even across the board? So, Derek, what are kind of your impressions? Number one, of just this edge defensive end position. Obviously, we've already talked about it to pretty great length and broken down a lot of those individual players. But your thoughts on that real quick, and then your thoughts on the two guys competing in Latu and Kwity Paye.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be very interesting to see how the year progresses for these two guys. They have different skill sets between the two of them. So it makes it very difficult right now, Cody, to kind of insinuate which one would be getting the start like at the end of the year. I have a very blunt answer as to who would start right now, and that's obviously going to be Kwity Paye for a couple different reasons. One, the fact that for the majority of your snaps, at least early in the game, you're going to see a lot of rundowns. So you're going to see a lot of situations where the Indianapolis Colts going to have a lot more run situations. You're going to see Kwity Paye in there for a lot more of those snaps. Two, and the other thing is that he's been in the league for several years now. So he's going into his fourth year in the league now. And, Latu is just coming into it now. Yes, Latu might prove to be a better pass rusher than Kwity Paye. That's what we're all expecting him to be. But still, Kwity Paye is more used to the NFL level than Latu is right now. So I think that is another aspect to it. And Cody, I was just sitting here thinking about this, and I think it's a point that I don't know if I have heard anyone else bring it up so far this year or this offseason about who's going to get more snaps and why. here's another point I'll throw at you, and I think you'll agree with me here because you're an analytics guy in this regard. So a lot of times your defense is going to be predicated on what the opposing offense has to do. Now, if the Indianapolis Colts this year take an offensive jump like what we expect them to do with Anthony Richardson and all these other weapons, if the Colts start scoring more points, guess what? That's going to cause opposing teams, especially if they have some potentially early deficits, you may see a lot more opportunities where opposing offenses, they're going to have to throw the football more than they traditionally would early in games to try to keep up with the Indianapolis Colts from time to time. Now, that is, of course, if the Indianapolis Colts end up scoring points at the level that they do, or that we hope that they do. If they do, though, then I fully expect Latu to be taking a lot more snaps than what maybe some people would have early predicated, because once again, if you know that these teams are going to be throwing the ball a lot more consistently to make sure that they're moving down the field quicker, you need to put Latu out there for more snaps than what you probably originally thought you were going to early in the year or even towards the end of the year. So there's a lot of different ways that this can go down, but that last point, I think that's really going to predicate it on who's going to get the majority of the snaps. It's really going to all depend upon how these games fluctuate for the Colts this year. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 with NBA, NHL, college basketball, other entries like that today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Prize Picks even offers injury insurance so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. So, for example, for basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game and does not return in the second half of a game, that player projection won't count against you, and the rest of your entry stays alive. Summer's here, so that means NBA, football, all those types of stuff. It's not here right now. So we got the MLB and the WNBA to pass the time. Have had a couple things here. A lot of Asia Wilson props here that are really good that I'm very interested in making. So I would definitely keep an eye out for any of those. Shohei Ohtani for MLB props. Highly suggest you guys hit that over when it comes to Ohtani, when it comes to total bases. Be sure to download the app today and use code BTJ for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the app today and use code BTJ for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, it's sponsored by Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
That's a very good point. I hadn't really considered that because, I mean, Derek, what was the deal? Like, why were, obviously Dwight Freeney, Robert Mathis, great players in their own right, but why were they so impactful? It's because there were so many times when the Colts were playing with leads, right? They obviously had Peyton Manning. They had this dynamic offense year in and year out. And so they just needed guys who could be closers, right? And let's be honest, with how the Colts offense has been pretty much ever since Kwity Paye has been here, yes, they've had moments, but there's been a lot of games where they haven't, where the offense's game plan is run out the clock, win this game and don't get the ball back to, the offense, and while, yes, of course, that's going to be a part of how offenses attack the Colts, like no doubt about that. Like, I think that is just something to consider. Like, if the Colts offense does make that leap, like we're hoping they can make that leap, and they're putting up even better points and better stats than they were in 2023. Yes, Latu and all these other guys that are more pass rush oriented, they're going to be out there more just naturally. So yeah, that is a great point to make there when it comes to Latu versus Kwity Paye. But that really will depend. And Derek, even though Latu obviously is kind of that specialist when it comes getting after the quarterback. I mean, I think sometimes we can kind of forget that Latu was dang good in the run department too at UCLA. I mean, the dude had the most tackles for loss of any college player, right? So he was like on the defensive line, man, he was a game wrecker back there, not just at getting after the quarterback, but in his entire game. That's why I think the Colts felt so strongly that they were going to take him over any other defensive player available. Think about that, Derek. Any other player the Colts had at their disposal in the 2024 draft, and they chose to go with Latu because they felt like, well, yes, he's great at getting after the quarterback, and that's obviously the most important thing. That's not just his game. He's not another Yannick Ngakoue, where he can get, 10 to whatever many sacks per year, 8 to 10 or whatever, but he can't stop the run to save his life. No, Latu can do that as well, which I think is a big thing. And honestly, while Kwity Paye will probably get more of those first and second downs right away, I just think that spells trouble for Kwity because if Latu can, continue to build upon what he did in college, like I really do believe, Derek, even maybe as early as this season at some point, like Kwity Paye's snap count could go down even more, which is crazy to even think about because he wasn't even on the field on third down towards the end of last season. I mean, Tyquan Lewis was out snapping him in terms of pass rush at that point. So that's kind of where I stand with it. But it is a situation, maybe in a similar way to Pierce. And, when it comes to Pierce and Adonai Mitchell, where Kwity Paye might be that starter just because he has familiarity with the system. He's been in the NFL for a couple of years, so I think he just has a leg up naturally from that, as opposed to a rookie coming in. But, man, I tell you what, when you look at the ceilings, I mean, Kwity Paye's ceiling is nowhere near what Latu is. I mean, it's not even in the same stratosphere, let's be honest. So that is what is kind of like, that's going to be the interesting thing is like, do the Colts go based off of familiarity and maybe right away Kwity Paye's a slightly better run defender, than Latu, or do they just say, you know what, the future is now. Quity's going to be a guy that's going to come in occasionally, but he's not going to be a starter. That is what I'm really intrigued about when it comes to this battle. Like, what direction do the Colts, Charlie Partridge, all these guys go to? Because you don't just take a guy, basically first overall on defense to not have a big role, right away.
Right.
So,
and especially with the fact that, you've invested so much into this and you even went and re-signed Kwity Paye this offseason as well. I mean, no doubt these guys are both going to have roles in this system, but you're right. I mean, Latu, pretty close to the same size as Kwity. Actually, as a matter of fact, is almost 2 inches taller than Kwity, which is actually quite crazy to think about. Quity's a little bit heavier, definitely a bit stronger than Latu, but then again, Latu hasn't had as much time to get around a NFL locker room like Kwity has. So it will definitely be a lot of fun to think about. And this is going to be one of those battles in training camp that, is going to be interesting to talk about. Who is making the big plays? Who is standing out? Who is doing anything? Because, I mean, like you said, Cody, the only way that Kwity retains his role is if he somehow, some way is still putting up numbers that he did last year, if not more that he did before. So he's going to have to get more consistent, and he's going to have to make sure he's getting after the quarterback, because if he isn't, then, I mean, you're right. Latu is going to be in a situation where it's his job to lose, because, I mean, like you said, Latu certainly not undersized by any stretch of the imagination. It will be interesting to see how he handles NFL right tackles in the run department. But with him being so smart and attacking the game the way that he does, and with Charlie Partridge being in there now, you got to wonder how much that helps this defensive line too. So all in all, there's a lot to talk about with these two, and that's going to be a matchup that is going to be fun to watch.
Absolutely. So, guys, let us know what you think when it comes to the edge position, defensive end, number 1 or 2, depending how you look at it. Essentially, who's going to be that other guy alongside Samson Ebukam when week 1 does come for the Indianapolis Colts? And if it is, one player over the other, how does a snap count kind of, figure itself out through the course of the 2024 season? Curious your guys' thoughts on this. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we greatly appreciate it. As always, guys, we're trying to make a push to 20K with training camp right around the corner. We'd love for you guys to consider, if you haven't already, hit subscribe, smash that like button, all that good stuff. Leave a comment, share it with your friends, all that good stuff. We would greatly appreciate that. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. And as always, guys, go Colts.